Welcome to Rock That Relationship, a podcast about all things relationship with Corey and Tracy.
Now let's get real and start creating relationships that rock.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Rock That Relationship. Tracy and I are really excited today to talk about money. Actually, it's a really interesting topic to talk about money and how you can thrive in a relationship when, you've got that sort of elephant in the room of money, whether you are, sharing those checking accounts or whether you have independent sources of money and you don't commingle that. How does money get in the way of thriving, and how can you thrive through this idea of money? So, Tracy, we got a lot to say on this topic. We've been chatting about this for a long time, so I'm glad we're getting an opportunity to kind of banter it a little bit.
Yeah, and let's address what exactly do people mean by elephant in the room, and why are they using an elephant? And, the elephant in the room is something they're not talking about. And why are you not talking about stuff? I feel like that should be our number one issue, right? Like, if you're not talking about it, something that everybody uses every day, right? Like money is every day. It's for all of our bills. It's for all the things that we buy. It's for the things that we want to do. So I feel like money should never be an elephant in the room. And I'm not sure why that phrase even exists, but
right.
I guess a giant thing just hiding there and people are ignoring it.
Plain sight. Yes. Right. Well,
something
and
gigantic.
And didn't we've talked in several episodes about the book 8 Dates, right? And this idea that, money is something that should be talked about early on, because it doesn't really matter how you necessarily handle money, as long as you're compatible with the person that you're with and that you are okay with how each other handles money, or in that sense. But if you have very different views on money and have different mindsets, that can create problems.
Yes.
So how has your money mindset in coupling changed over time? Like, have you been in relationships where you commingled funds, and then other relationships where you're like, absolutely not, these are my funds? Like, how has your mindset changed over time?
I probably had the vast majority of my relationships not being commingled funds. And then when I was married, I was not working. So it wasn't commingled funds. It was my ex-wife's funds, but I managed everything. Managed it in a way that put her in a good position for life and retirement and all that. But my caution on that would be for people. Number one, I put my financial health at risk because I didn't work for 8 years. So that didn't help. That was not good for me. And then two, that made her annoyed because she felt that she was supporting me, even though I was cheaper than an au pair or a nanny. And that caused a lot of frustration in the marriage. And then, I don't know what my other point was. I had a third point about it, but managing. I'm a good money manager. Imagine if the person she was with wasn't, right? And mismanaged her funds. So I'll never commingle funds again. I will always have my money be completely separate from anybody I'm dating, no matter what. Even if I was rich and wanted to support that person, then I would dole out the money in whatever way, paying for things or whatever, but I would never commingle again. That's just, especially now being a, divorce attorney.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've seen what happens when that goes awry. Well, I mean, my mindset changed over time. I mean, with my longest term partner, we were in what was probably as close to a marriage as possible. Marriage wasn't legal at the time. And we owned a house together, we owned cars together, and we had a child, and we both made approximately the same amount of money. So commingling made a lot of sense to us. And frankly, I thought at least that we were sort of in this forever. So I didn't really think much about commingling back in my 20s. My subsequent relationships, though, my money mindset really changed. It's like, I don't mean to be rude, but this is my stuff and that's your stuff. And
also you earned it in your 20s. Yeah. You weren't really earning a ton. So it wasn't as big of an issue. right?
No, in the 20s, I was driving around in a stick shift car that didn't,
Well,
that
you're
could
still
barely,
kind of driving
well,
those
I
same
am,
cars.
I know, well, I am,
The personal choice.
but I was driving, I mean, I didn't have anything really. So we were commingling like nothing. So
Right.
we were commingling whose egg crates we got to
But
use to
also
stack our
you two
clothing in.
helped each other to build wealth. I mean,
Right.
that's different when you're learning, right?
Right. We
You
did.
coming into relationships now where you've built your own wealth, and it would be very unfair for somebody to try and take that or take advantage of it.
Yeah. And that's what I agree. And I've heard this is more and more with couples when we're talking about thriving is being very clear about the setup that you want and then staying to it. Right. And I've heard of many people who are married and would otherwise potentially commingle funds. They live together. They might even have children, and yet they contribute a portion of their paycheck to a joint account that pays for utilities and bills. Yet they keep their own money. Very specific ways of keeping track of money. So it's just becoming more and more common to do that. And I think people like having that agency. And I mean, of course, look at the time, right? It's not 1950s, where, with wealth building can happen with, anybody in a relationship where one person isn't always the deferred stay at home parent or the housewife or mostly housewife from the 1950s. And so now you're looking at people who bring in salaries together. I've heard people who do things where, they put in a flat rate, like we're each going to put this amount of money into a bank account. And then there's also a percentage rate where we're going to put in this percentage of our paycheck into this joint account.
I'm getting mad just hearing this. I don't think people should do that at all. I will never have a joint account. I would never commingle anything because you have Venmo now and you have Zelle Pay, which can happen instantaneously. So you could sit down and figure out your bills and one person could pay. Number one, I like everything to be paid on a miles earning credit card. And so I don't want to waste even one penny. Like I'll buy a soda with it, with the credit card, right? To get the points. And so I don't want to waste any of my points that I could be accumulating on something. And I'm really getting heated up while you're talking. It's making me very agitated.
This is just another reason why you and I are not together, because
I don't want a joint account with anybody. It would make me so angry. I'd be like, it's not your, I feel like that's, for me, it's really agitating me.
See, and on the other hand, I would feel so disorganized if I had to Venmo here's my portion for gas, or here's my portion for electric. Here's my portion.
I mean, figure it out for the month.
Oh my gosh, if I had to do that every month, we just put a few $100 in a joint account and then it just deducts.
Yeah, but who pays it? You do?
No, it's just automatic deduction. So I just have my bank.
That's another thing too about bills, right? Yeah. When a person puts themselves in the other person's hands, if all the bills are in your name, then you're the one getting the credit for it. I just noticed I was looking at my credit rating, right? I paid off an account and I transferred money to one of those Discover no interest for 18 months. I paid it off and guess what happened? My my credit score went down. Now I don't intend to purchase anything, although I did just get a $6,000 water filtration system for the house. That is going through Wells Fargo Bank, right? So it's 0 interest for 18 months. So I'll pay that off. So none of that's going to affect me, but it's possible that my credit score going down could damage me if I wanted to purchase something, a car or whatever. And that's the thing that people aren't realizing when they're commingling anything, that they are screwing themselves basically in their credit. I mean, you really have to understand what's happening with credit. And I never cared about money. I've never cared about money my entire life, right? And guess what I got yesterday from Amazon? Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I'm started to read it and highlight it because you are a person who has built your wealth and been very what do you call it? Thoughtful and planning about it. And then somebody like me comes along and I've not been like that. So it's not really fair to you if you and I start dating and then I'm it would irritate me to be with you because I'd be envious all the time. And because we're only friends, I can learn from you. But if I moved in with you and all my bills were in your name, that would piss me off.
Well, they don't all have to be in my name. We put the cable bill in one
Yeah,
person's
but like
name. You
if
could
you're
put
here's the other thing about living together, right? I think commingling and living together. This is all very important. So I always said a duplex is best for a relationship with a door in the middle with like a hotel where either side can
Yes.
shut it and lock it. But you both are earning, you both have your own utility bills. You both have your own this and that because like going forward in life, we don't know what's going to happen. I never thought I'd be married, let alone divorced, especially divorced over 50 years old. And it's like, oh, I put myself back years, right? By relying on another person, even though I was providing a service in exchange for, all the things that we were having as a family, it didn't help me. And my clients I'm seeing who are in traditional straight relationships, no, it doesn't help them. And it doesn't help either one because it builds so much resentment. So I feel
Yeah.
like to thrive in a relationship, you both need to be financially independent, whether you're going to have children, homeschool your children, whatever, you need to have a way to take care of yourself on the side. I mean, look around, and you brought up the 50s, but look around at what's happening with all these fundamentalist communities and things around the country. Those people are trapped there because they have no independent wealth.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you 100% independent wealth, but I don't think popping $100 or $200 into a joint account called utilities and then having the gas bill just sucked out of there once a month. So you just don't have to have the headache of that. And then
I can't handle it.
See, but I think for a relationship to thrive, again, it doesn't matter what you and I personally would want to do. It matters that who we're with wants to do the same thing that we want to do. That's where we talk about thriving. So you and I have very different approaches. We would not thrive because we don't agree, but I'm with somebody who agrees that that is a great financial setup for us. And we don't
Do you agree on what's in that account? Like you agree what's going to be, you agree how much is going in, each person puts in the same amount or proportional to their incomes?
Same amount.
And then what comes out of it is agreed on ahead of time.
Exactly. We don't spend anything out of there that isn't already pre-agreed upon, which is utilities and basic groceries, things that we share, period. And we both agree. And then that works great for us because we don't ever have to talk about money. We don't have to sit down every month and be like, okay, the electric bill is $136. Your portion is this, my portion. We don't even look at it.
So the utilities come straight out of that.
It does. So our bank accounts put the money in every month. I don't even see my money go in. The utilities and all that is withdrawn from it. I don't see it. It's like we just live and we just always just, make sure that there's
enough. Well, and that gives you a better sense of peace and probably her as well, that you're not having to look at it every month. You're not worried about it.
Exactly. So for us, that works. But I understand for you having it totally separate, but everything else we have is separate. All of our checking, savings, credit cards, all of that is separate. So if I buy a pair of shoes with my credit card, I get those points. It's just, it's the smaller things like this that just come out of our bank account. So it's just more for us to not have to have money conversations that might be contentious. Right. It's just we've pre-agreed. And I think that's the key is just to pre-agree on what you want to do. And so for you, finding if you do decide you want to date at some point in time, great, find a duplex and each have your own separate lives. Again, the thriving comes from agreeing. It doesn't come from which way is the best way. Because there are other people who can thrive by commingling everything. They might want that. And that's totally up to them. That's not what I want. I want to have financial independence. But as you mentioned before, when I was young and I was commingling my garage sale decor and my $2 in my checking account, it seemed like less at stake. If something went wrong, you get $1, I get $1, and then I get, a couple garage sale items. But now that I'm older, I want to keep my wealth separate.
And you want stability. And I think it is harder to have stability, but it is an interesting paradox because when people are younger and building a life and what we've been taught to believe is the best way to be in the world, to be, a couple and to grow together and have children together and, whatever, one person works, the other person takes care of the kids. And, that's I think a model that's been used. It can work. I'm not saying it never works, but it has been used. A lot of women have been hurt by it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And people who are trapped, right, where, they don't have any income of their own or they've quit their job to stay at home and care for children or whatever the case may be, or even be a caretaker, right? Mm-hmm. And those kind of things. And it's tough because money and trust go hand in hand. And it's really hard because you see people on the back end of that where they went into a relationship trusting that their partner had their best interests in mind. and that they weren't going to harm them if something came to an end. And that's not usually how it goes. There are so few amicable separations. And, by the end, you're in court with people who are like arguing over a pencil and would spend $800 on lawyer fees to see who gets the pencil because the principle of it. And so the hard part is money and trust are so intertwined, and money seems to be like that. It's like the evidence of trust. In the end is, can I trust you with my wealth? And the answer is, unfortunately, often not.
And wealth just means health, meaning you can take care of yourself. So when we say wealth, it doesn't mean that you have to be rich or a baller. It means that you can take care of yourself, right? And so like I put myself at a financial disadvantage by not working, and put myself, working much longer than I should have to based on my education and all that. That's 100% on me. So when you talk about that stuff, like for me, it brings up a lot, and I don't want to have that going forward. And so if I meet people, then I say, I would never commingle my finances. I won't do that. It's nothing to do with you, but it's a stressor I don't want in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
And that begs the whole question of living with another person even. And maybe some people are thriving. I've heard recently of several couples that they either bought the house next door or bought a house in the neighborhood or something like that, where I think this is outdated belief. And I don't think it's just based on our age, because I think a lot of younger people aren't living together. That maybe living together isn't all that it's cracked up to be because of finances, because of things like that.
Right. And you think about too, these situations where you might have a couple who purchases a home together, right? So they're both in it together. They both have an investment in it. And then unfortunately, with housing prices being as high as they can be, is they separate and neither partner can afford to buy the other one out. And they're stuck selling the house, and neither of them have anywhere to go. So it's one version of the story. And the other version of the story is, particularly with people in our age group, is one person already has a place to live and the other person somehow moves in with them. But yet there's also the person whose, home it is that they own. They're the ones who are doing things like putting in the $6,000 filtration system because it's their equity. And so then you have this weird power differential that becomes very tricky as well. And so those two scenarios are, that's kind of what we have to choose from, is trust and buy something together and then hope that you don't split up, because if you do, you're stuck, or one of you moves in with the other.
Yeah.
And, and then what do you do? So
well, if you do move in with somebody else and you have your own property, you should keep that property and rent it out.
Yeah. If you have,
don't get rid of your property. That should be a key to everybody.
I mean, I think that some of the key pieces when I think of thriving is, one is agreeing on how you want to set up your financial system, whatever that looks like. Whether it's full commingling, if it's having a joint account for something like utilities, or keeping everything separate and Venmoing each other. It's just agreeing on that early on. I'm also a huge fan of prenups. Because particularly with wealth you've already accumulated, and being very clear as to who's whose. I think that there's some element of just structuring things at the beginning of a relationship rather than waiting until they bubble up and come up later on. So for instance, okay, so the water bill, you talk about you're going to jointly pay the water bill. It's going to be 50-50. Great. Okay. No questions about it. But you don't talk about it. And then I just read a story the other day about this woman who was she was a roommate of someone. So it wasn't an intimate relationship, but they had agreed on a 50-50 split on the water bill. She was gone for 3 months during the summer, and the woman charged her 50% for the water bill. And she's like, we agreed that it was 50%. And she's like, but I wasn't here to use the water. And so even those very little details of things, I think the more you can discuss on the front end, the more likely you'll be able to thrive, right? You're just not going to come up as this, point of contention later on.
Well, and you have to know if the person you're getting involved with, being in a relationship or a roommate situationship, are they reasonable or not? It's not reasonable for that lady to pay for water when she's not there, and the other lady's the only one using it, unless they agreed to build a garden and they irrigated it,
Right. And the whole thing is talk about it on the front end, because even just to keep your water hookup every month is $20. So should that lady contribute half of that? They don't, but sometimes it's hard to know what you don't know. But I had a partner at one point in time where we lived together. I've talked about this before on here, is that we had a co-living agreement where we actually talked about who was going to pay for what and how we were going to put some things in a joint account. We had Netflix in one person's name. We had Hulu in another person's name. And we just said, we laid it all out and we signed it, and we even got it notarized just because it was like, we wanted to be very clear. And not for necessarily for legal purposes, but we never fought about money, really.
Right.
Because we were very clear.
Because you talked about it.
Exactly.
So when you say notarize and well, if you're going to notarize something, it means you've read it, right? You're not going to sign something that you didn't read, and that you actually have had a discussion about it. Again, communication. How do you want to be?
Exactly.
And I have dated people who aren't as financially responsible as me, and it was problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think was the biggest problem with that?
They get really upset, like if you ask them questions about things. And then there are things that one person lied to me about because she didn't have the money, even though she made good money and all that, but she mismanaged her money. And so the thing is about like money, how people treat their money really matters. And it, like, you can tell a lot about how things are going in their life and how they're likely to do other things, like how they're likely to run their life. And I do think it's important. And it's not like, oh, you have to be rich, but, are you blowing your money? Are you just blowing it left and right? I don't like that.
Well, and I like that idea because there really is a parallel. This idea of how you manage your money is often part and parcel to how you manage your life. Are you an organized person? You're probably going to have a very organized money management system. Are you more conservative and risk averse? You're probably going to save more if you can. Are you, kind of impulsive, as a person? Then you might run out and buy a pair of $300 shoes. And so sometimes it's very telling about who a person is in other areas of their life by watching how they spend money or save money or use money. In your case, you talk about putting every single expense on a credit card and getting those miles for it. I can tell a lot about you and how important traveling is to you because I know you're putting those on to get points. A lot of times you get miles and I just know that those things are helpful to you, to be able to do that. And
well, like I see people using a debit card and I'm like, why is that person doing that? Like they're literally, like the last 5 trips I've taken to Peru, to Spain, to Hawaii, and to Thailand, twice I used points. So it's like when you're using debit or using cash, I mean, some things you have to pay for cash. I have to pay for my pickleball lessons in cash, right? Like, but when you're paying cash or you're paying debit when you could be using a credit card, you're just missing out on like getting something for nothing.
Right. And that tells me a lot about you, not that you're trying to get something for nothing, but that, you're wanting to get the best deal possible. And some people don't
Well, I'm purchasing stuff, which is buying that credit card company is making money off of that from the merchant. Yep. And so they're then giving me something that's valuable to me in exchange. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's very like savvy to go and do that. Like I'm not, I try to minimize anything not done on credit card.
Yeah. Well, I had to get a new HVAC unit recently and I put it on my credit card. Like 2 weeks later, I get a notice from American Airlines that I've been moved up to platinum status because I put it on my American Airlines card.
Right.
And if you know enough about me and the amount I travel, I have that credit card because it gives me free lounge access and I like sitting in the lounge. But this is a good example of like, you can tell a lot by a person based on their financial transactions. How they spend their money is going to tell you about what's important to them and their values. So if you're with somebody who spends money incredibly different than you, either you have to be okay with that or, try to at least interpret it and say, where are our values colliding? I'm not impulsive with my money at all. Yet if I'm with someone who's impulsive, even if it's with their own money and it doesn't affect me, it just shows me that they're an impulsive in general. And there's going to be other things that they may be impulsive. Can I live with that?
Or they can't do stuff that you want to do because they mismanage their money. Right.
Right. Exactly. So when you think about this idea about making financial decisions, and we talk about, being in agreement with how you actually make those decisions, like on a tactical level. But if we think of it more kind of internal, some people make these kind of financial decisions with their their hearts, like with their, maybe it's their intuition or what they feel. And some people make them with their heads. They look at all the data and they say, here's the financial decisions I should make. And so you have two people that might be making a financial decision together that are coming from very, very different places in how they make it. How do you make your decisions? Are they more like with your heart, like what feels right? Or are they more with your head? Like you do all the research, you get 20 different estimates, you look up everything online to see
That's not me. No.
Okay.
I mean, I just bought a $6,000 water filtration system when I said, okay, I'll do that. And then I thought about it later and I wanted to back out of it, but then I called the guy and we talked about it and ended up doing it anyway. But that's the thing, right? Oh, and I'm doing that all on no interest for 18 months. So it's only $329 a month, which is less than a car payment, and it's going to improve the whole system in my house. But no, I do nothing based on research.
Okay.
It's all intuition.
But that's good to know, because if someone was with you and you had to make joint decisions together, they might think that that was haphazard and uninformative.
Well, my ex-wife, she was very good at planning trips. And then I was like, I'm not planning anything, because when I planned it, it just ended in disaster. Because I don't plan things. I generally just show up. In other countries, I won't plan ahead. I just go there.
But that's good. That's good for a partner to know, because that can create
stress.
Stress.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's the same thing. Do people want to retire at a certain point? Do people want to have certain things that they're bound to do? My best friend's dating someone who's retired now, and she's worried that he's going to want her to start traveling with him. He travels with his sister and other people, so he doesn't need that, and he does kind of specialized trips. But do you have to be with someone at the same stage of life, or do you have to be with somebody who's wanting to be at the same stage, right? I mean, money makes a big difference. Can you retire? Can you not? I'm not going to be able to retire now for a long time.
Because of your water filtration system?
Yeah. Because I didn't work for 8 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and now you're
that's my bad. Yeah. And I left the police department early, so I'm only getting a pittance of a retirement where my other friends are living high off the municipal hog. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm getting hardly anything, but that was my choice. I also had a life of adventure for many years. But looking back at my life, I loved being a step parent. I loved the time that I spent with the kids. But if I had really understood what I was doing to myself, I wouldn't go back and do it the same way.
Okay. I mean,
I wouldn't not work for 8 years. That really did not help me.
Yep.
I mean, I'm living fine now, but I'm not, I have friends who are retired from places that I worked where I left, and, they're doing things I want to be doing now. But when I was doing those things, they were at their nose to the grindstone, and they were jealous of me. So it's all very interesting. It's do I want to be a person working into my 70s? Well, maybe actually I do. I mean, I'm only 54. And the thing is, I do think I'm in, besides the police department, the most demanding job I've ever had now. And it actually, as much as it causes me stress, it's giving me a lot of, I think it's very good for my brain,
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's really that. It's, again, you just have to talk to the other person. Where do you want to go in your life? And right now I'm in a period of, I don't want to hitch my wagon to anybody for any reason, and I don't want them dragging me down,
Mm-hmm.
And even if somebody super rich came along and was I'll pay for everything. Well, okay, I'm not going to give up my townhouse. So am I going to still work so that I can pay for that townhouse? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
As Susie Orman, the great Susie Orman always said, money is security, and it's however you feel secure that matters. Yep. And if somebody tries to manipulate you or convince you or something else, try to get you away from what makes you comfortable, that's a red flag,
Right. Well, it's emotional safety. Finances that contribute to your emotional safety, because if you feel like things are bad or you want something different and you don't have the financial means to change, you're stuck.
Well, how I always want to sell my house or burn it down, right? Or just get rid of it or run away. And then I talked to my former mother-in-law, who's 20 years older than me, and she's in a rental. She recently bought a house with the help of, I think, her job or her family, whatever. But she was telling me, like, the fear that she lives with being in a rental and being in a place that's
Mm-hmm.
very expensive. And the owner of her property was like 99 years old. And she's like, when that lady dies, the family could just kick her out or raise her
Mm-hmm.
rent so high. And she said I mean, that's the thing that sticks in my head every time I'm like ready to run away. Is it coming back? I've already priced myself out of several markets, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Seattle, where I can't go back to live. I can go back to visit, but
Right.
not to live. And so it's like, would I price myself out again? And yes, there are days when, I want to just get rid of everything and run away. And if I was in a relationship like that, also the way that my emotions are, like, up this day about doing this. Next day, I want to run away. Next day, I want to keep the house. Like, that's very stressful for other people. So it's,
Mm-hmm.
finances are an issue of stability. And like, we have to have money till the day we die.
Yeah. Well,
There's
I mean,
literally no free anything in this world
and it
unless you're already rich.
comes back to that question that I ask, is making your decisions with your head or your heart. And for you, you're talking about that those decisions or those desires of how you want to spend your life and thus your money are dependent on how you're feeling or what's going on around you. Whereas someone like me would say, okay, if I'm going to sell my house, I'd spend 6 months researching the comps in my neighborhood. I would fix up different areas of my house. I would know exactly where I was going and making it more of those decisions with my head. I mean, certainly I'd use my heart to decide whether or not I wanted to sell, but the details of it would definitely be from my head. And so I need to be with someone who can appreciate that process. Like that it may take me, 6 weeks before I buy a new lamp because I need to research every single lamp that's out there to know that I'm getting a good deal and then I won't have to return it. I mean, if I'm with somebody who doesn't appreciate that or at least can tolerate that, I'm going to drive them insane. Like, why
Right.
would they want that? Someone else is just like, oh yeah, cool. I saw this lamp and I just bought it. And it's like, okay, great. I mean, I've done that before, not often, but it's like in some ways just being attuned to like how someone wants to live. And like when you're talking about retire, like what if I retire before my partner does and I'm wanting to go see the world, I'm wanting to go do different things and they're still working for another 5 years.
Right.
How do we balance that? And so again, going back to these are all kind of communication topics, right? This idea of talking about how you want to join or not join your finances, how you want to communicate about your finances, how you decide to spend money, right? Is it from your head or from your heart? Is it, what are our retirement plans? I mean, I know some people who listen to our podcast, we've got some really young listeners who are like, I'm not retiring for a long time. Well, yeah, but these are things to think about, in terms of your own future. But we have other people who someone might have already retired and be thinking about maybe they also went from a very nice kind of thick income to a very fixed income now that they're retired and I've heard of that happening with a lot of couples who were used to being able to go out to dinner all the time and now they're on, retirement funds and it's a lot less money. And so they have to completely shift their mindset about
Right.
how they spend money. So like lots of things to think about and talk about.
Well, it should be that your partner wants you to feel secure in your financial situation, right? Like each person should want the other person to feel secure. And if they're making the other person feel insecure about money, number one, that's not thriving. And number two, those are red flags.
Yeah, absolutely. Or strong arming you into agreeing to something too that you're not interested in, like co-purchasing a car together. And you're like, I don't really want to do that. I don't want my name on the loan. Or even at the beginning of a relationship, like I talked about the co-living agreement, when you say, okay, we're going to use your Netflix account, we're going to use my Hulu account, or we're both going to jointly pay
Right.
for the water bill, is making sure that you both feel good and comfortable with that, and that no one is really forcing the other one into doing that. Because the key to thriving is emotional, right? And if you feel forced into some financial arrangement that doesn't make you feel like you're thriving, it doesn't make you feel safe, then that's just because you have that system in place doesn't equal thriving. You have to both feel good about the system, that whatever system you're implementing.
Well, and you have to feel that you're independent and that you can be independent. I think that's very important to never give your independence over to another person. And then, if one person, if both, I strongly believe that in a majority of places in the United States, not big municipal areas, both people need their own car. But even when I was living in Seattle, like public transportation wasn't that great. And I shared a car with someone for a while and it caused major problems. I mean, we're best friends. It didn't cause that many problems, but it made her feel trapped. It made her feel like she would say, "Oh, can I use the car? I need the car." It made her feel insecure and like what is my life? Why am I asking another adult? So our neighbors shared a car together and that did not bother them. But for us, it was terrible. And I will never, ever, ever share a car with someone, ever.
See,
I will always have my own car.
I mean, you've also been through a lot of different scenarios in which you've determined that that's what's important to you. And so being with someone, it'll be important for you to find somebody who doesn't want to share a car or whatever the case may be. And some people are,
even if you do end up being with someone who is like, "Oh, let's share a car," and you're like, "Okay," you better be able to get your own if things don't work out.
Yeah. And keep the conversation open to, all right, let's start with one car, see how that works. And we'll revisit this. If it becomes too problematic, then we need to be open to having a second car, or whoever gets their own car, or whatever the case may be, is, you have a system in place, but also being okay with going back and saying this system isn't working or we forgot this.
Well, but here's the thing. I have a client now who was in a marriage that she thought was great and she has children and now they're divorcing and he's become very controlling, which he was not during the marriage until the end of the marriage. This is what led to the breakdown of the marriage. And there's one car now and they have children and he's demanding the car back and his lawyer's demanding the car back. And she's like, no, unless you give me half of the amount, I'll go out and get a different car, but I can't be without a car with my kids. And that is the thing, right? If you're going to share a car, then and it's in one person's name or it's in both your names, you better have a written agreement before you do that as to how both people will end up with their own car in the event that either that's not working out for both of you or you split up. Because what I'm seeing is a lot of people are left without a car, without a home, without whatever. And that is a very scary place to put yourself in. So if you're in a relationship and you want to thrive in that relationship, to me, that means that both people feel that any moment, if they split up, they will be okay. But the vast majority of people are not in that position. And that's where the abuse and the financial abuse comes in and the manipulation and all that. And so in order to avoid that, yes, you write a prenup. Yes, you write a co-living agreement. Yes, you write these things up so that you understand, okay, what will happen if we have to split up, right?
Yeah. Well, and said from the family law attorney, but also, you and I have both had, breakups that we had to divide up financial assets and all that kind of stuff. And the reality is a lot of people say, like, if I plan that we're going to break up, then that will doom my relationship, right? But part of the thriving in a relationship is feeling safe and secure to know that whatever outcome happens, you're going to be okay. And I think that people get confused. They think that thriving is just sometimes not talking about this stuff or just staying, even if it's bad. But thriving is really feeling safe. And if it makes you feel safe, for a lot of people to know what would happen if this went south, that makes me feel safe. I'm less likely to actually run because it's like car insurance. I'm more comfortable driving because I have insurance.
Right?
Yes.
It couldn't just be like a breakup. They could die.
Yes.
So everything in your life should be so that each person can be completely independent if the other is no longer there.
And that's thriving. That's not saying I'm going to marry you with the idea of divorce in mind. It's financial security just feels good even when you're in a great relationship. You are not separated. It just feels like you have your own autonomy. And that is really, really important for many people. Some people, that's not maybe they're okay with it. But I would say to those folks that are okay with giving up their financial autonomy is to really think through, what that means short and long term, and what that means for how you feel, because you do create a weird power vacuum where the person who's given up their autonomy has to sometimes ask for, I've seen people say, I ask for my monthly allowance because I'm not the one working, or I have to share the car and those things. And is that the dynamic that you want? Does that help your relationship thrive? And for some people, maybe the answer is yes. For me, the answer is no. But being able to think through those things before, you just sort of sign over what you have.
Well, that's the thing. Talk it through. I think people are so scared to have these discussions. And that's why that book, again, 8 Dates, is so good, right? Like, have these discussions about these very, very important things. And don't be like me and jump into things and then have the discussion later. Have the discussion. When two people meet, they are independent. Right? And then they decide to get in a relationship and they merge. And for 50 to 75%, it doesn't work out very well for them. And so you need to be really upfront about everything and how you want things to be. And if a person isn't interested in that, isn't interested in your financial well-being, then those are big red flags that you need to really pay attention to and not proceed forward, because you don't want to be 50 years old and having to struggle to find a place to live, to find, a job, to do all of those things. It's very terrifying.
Well, and even early on too, is being okay with saying, okay, I have a different way that I like to spend money, save money. I mean, you and I are a really good example. We really make the financial decisions very differently. We have very different outlooks on our finances. And as much as, we could potentially want to be together, that to me is enough to say, I don't want to proceed, right? That's the 8 dates. That's the thing. At the very beginning, you say, listen, this is just going to be an incompatibility long term, and don't proceed in building a relationship. And people do this all the time. They'll say like, oh, I really want to have kids, and this person doesn't want to have kids, but we're going to be together anyways. And 2 years down the road, the person who didn't want to have kids hasn't changed their mind. The same thing happens with finances usually. I mean, unless there's a big kind of to do and somebody has an epiphany, they want to do their finances differently, they're probably not going to change how they've always been doing it. And it will be a point of frustration the entire relationship if you are not on the same page from the beginning. So either find someone who's on the same page or get on the same page. But if not, it will be proverbially the elephant in the room.
Yes. I mean, there's so many things, right? Again, it just all comes back to the same thing. Communication, 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 and communicate about what will we do in these different scenarios,
Exactly. Well, Tracy, we've covered a lot of ground today. This has, been a lively conversation, and yet one more reason why you and I are not together. But that's okay.
One more reason. Is it just our finances? I mean, you did plan a trip for us. You didn't end up going, but I did, and thank you. That was great.
True.
We really worked at it. I think we'd be fine. I mean, if the universe said, okay, you guys have to date, okay, I think we could do the duplex thing, no problem.
I think we could do the duplex, no problem.
We'd be like, what do you call it? A Boston marriage? There'd be no sex, and there'd be no, or was the Boston marriage with sex? I don't know. We'd be that Boston marriage, no sex. Hey, we live together. I think we'd actually do really well.
I mean, we talk enough. We talk for hours every day. So it would be good.
As long as we can shut the doors in between the duplex and lock it from our side. I put on my new Bose headphones.
There you go.
The signal, don't talk to me.
There you go. All right. Well, Tracy, thank you so much for the good conversation about this. And for all of our listeners out there, I hope you were able to at least resonate with some of these pieces and things that we talked about, and keeping those communication lines open is just really important. So to all of our listeners, until our next episode, go out there and rock those relationships. If you liked what you heard, check out our show notes for resources from today's episode. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Rock That Relationship, and go to our website at rockthatrelationship.com for updated episodes and more great information.
Thanks for listening. Now go rock those relationships.